Woo! Are we live?
We're live, I think. I think
we're live. Welcome to no, we're Game On. I guess we're Packers. Packers happy hour. Game On happy hour. Woo, woo, woo. It's been a Monday. It's a Monday, but we're here. We've got our drinks. We're going to talk about some stuff that happened today. But Maggie, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm very exhausted. How are you doing today, Perri?
I'm okay. Yeah, it's definitely been a Monday. But it's going to be a quick one for everyone today. It's going to be probably about 30 minutes. No, it's going to be 30 minutes. I'll be a little bit more definitive there. And we want to talk about some stuff. So first on the agenda is this weird cryptic news, I guess, that came out on Twitter today, which is that Everson Griffen is interested in either re-signing with the Vikings or signing with Vikings rival, the Green Bay Packers, which there's a lot of thoughts. I saw that maybe some people just think it's leverage, or that maybe he's actually interested in coming to a team that has a chance of winning a championship.
Boom, roasted.
But it's an interesting thought adding him to our front seven.
Yeah, we already literally, that's one of the first comments we have in the chat is just what this front seven would look like with Everson Griffen and Za'Darius Smith. And we can add Kenny Clark and Preston Smith.
Why can't I see the chat? Oh, now I can. So getting used to this whole thing.
But yeah, so, you know, what this front seven can look like. I mean, I think that we're already kind of excited about Preston and Za'Darius and Kenny and Rashawn. I know that you are one of Rashawn's biggest supporters. And then we're excited about what Kingsley Keke can do. So if you think about all that talent that's already there, adding a guy like Everson Griffen, and like you said, there's a lot of speculation that this could just be to kind of garner interest and make sure that the Vikings know that, you know, just kind of, you know, some media hubbub to get some interest there. But I'm all about it. I mean, whether it comes true or not, the thought of it is just enough. That front seven is already nasty. It would be one of the best, if not the best unit in the league after that.
I agree. And I think he's 32, right? So he's not going to be an every down defensive end. He's going to be in the rotation, which still allows those other guys like Rashawn and Kingsley Keke to get the snaps they need to make an impact. It just brings in another player that the Packers can use, and he's certainly disruptive, even at his age, between the passing game and in the run game. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but just I think he'll get signed before the season. I'm sure he'll be brought into training camp relatively soon for wherever he goes. But kind of the dynamic this year with some of those older players, we talked about Clay Matthews. Joseph in the chat mentioned Tramon Williams. So all these vets, Snacks, Mike Daniels that remain unsigned. Now, what does that look like? And I guess that kind of segues into kind of what these COVID lists are looking like. The reserved Justin Jefferson, the Vikings first round pick, made an appearance on that list today. We have players like Danny Vitale, former Packers fullback, opting out of the season because he has a newborn. So what do you think? I mean, do you think that this is something that we'll see a lot more of? Maybe more players, maybe high-profile names will opt out? Or do you think that it's just going to kind of trickle slowly and names will just kind of slowly be added?
I think it's going to be a slow trickle. I still think there's too many unknowns for players. It feels early right now to have players be deciding to opt out, and I understand for the reasons that some of them have, like Danny Vitale or the Chiefs offensive lineman who's staying in Canada to, because he's a doctor. But I think there's something about football players that it will take longer for them to decide not to play football. I just feel like they love the game so much that it's going to take a lot for them to decide to opt out, especially because I don't think they're going to get paid nearly as much money, which of course it's still a lot of money. I think it's $150,000 stipend. It's more than the average person's salary. At the same time, when you're used to getting, and when you're used to getting $3 million, $5 million, $12 million a year, like that's actually a huge loss to your lifestyle. Like they have mortgages to pay too. So I think it's going to take a lot. And I think the season hasn't started yet, right? So it's not like players are in the building actually getting sick yet. And I wish it wouldn't take that to get them to opt out, but I think that's just what it's going to come down to. And again, like you said, Justin Jefferson got put on that list today, but that doesn't necessarily mean he tested positive. It just could mean that he came in contact with someone who tested positive and he's just waiting for his results back. So there's a lot of room, and I think they're being precautious.
Yeah, and I think that, now in Major League Baseball with the Marlins, like this is a whole nother dynamic that was brought to the table. Like we had live sports for a good 3 days, and now we have half of a roster that's testing positive and having to quarantine. And even if you think about it just from a gamesmanship perspective, like how do you feel the team if half of your starters are in quarantine, and if all your players are practicing in the same building? It feels difficult to know who came into contact with who. You're sharing a locker room, you're sharing space. So if we can't figure out baseball.
I know. And baseball even has like a whole reserve of players ready to go. Like they have the minor leagues, which is more than a practice squad is. And practice squad guys are still in the same building in the same area as the rest of the team. So
yeah. And I mean, we joke that we are the optimistic voices in Packerland, and we try to be, but it's just when you see it happening kind of around the sports sphere, knowing the impact it has in less contact heavy sports, wondering what that does to the NFL, and knowing that the Packers are reporting to, some of them are already traveling to Green Bay, they're reporting tomorrow, kind of what that looks like, what the testing process is like. And once you get all those big names rolling in, just I think the next couple of weeks are going to tell us a lot about whether or not the NFL is content to move forward with the season. And we talk all the time that money talks for the NFL, and they're going to do everything that they can to profit off of this. But at some point, the players will then step in, kind of like they did on social media the last couple of weeks, and say, hey, we have to do this safely, or we physically can't do it at all.
Yeah. And it's just like, do it safely when you're tackling each other. It's like, I don't understand how it's possible. And like you said, we're optimistic, but I'm also trying to be a little bit of a realist and like set my expectations. And I think if we as a country don't get the virus in check, we're not going to have a full NFL season. I mean, we've made it less than a week with MLB, and like those guys don't even touch each other when they're playing, basically, if they're like in the outfield. So it just, I don't know. It makes me nervous. It just makes me nervous. But at the same time, if we do figure it out, then we know that there are tons of vets who are kind of out there training, ready to play. Like we've talked about with Tremont, I'm sure Snacks and Mike Daniels are the kind of players who they've been in the league long enough. They know what to expect. They can hop onto a team without much and just sort of be ready to play. So in terms of like, let's say a player or two does get hurt or sick, like, that you can call upon those guys and have them just plug and play essentially.
Yeah, I think Katie joined us this week, which is exciting. Last week she wanted to make it and couldn't. So welcome to Happy Hour, Katie. But I think she asks a really good question. I'm curious to see what happens with the NBA now, because they're existing in a bubble where everything is a lot more restricted, and they're able to practice freely, and they're in this very, locked down and specific space. What do you think an NFL bubble would look like? I mean, just the amount of players that would have to down.
That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. Between coaches and training staff, and I don't know. I mean, think about how many fields you would have to have in one place. Like, where would you even get that many football fields to play? I also don't know. Oh, thanks, Mark. I don't know if like the NBA is even really like abiding by the bubble. Like you hear about all these players like, oh, they already broke the bubble, or someone sneaking out of the bubble or sneaking into the bubble. Yeah, like it'll be a very interesting, I think, case study, because if it works, then we know what works. But if it's clear that players are still sort of skirting rules, then it's like, what are you going to do? You can't ask thousands of people to not see their family, not interact with anybody but their teammates for 6 months.
Well, and just the sheer volume of people. We've talked about, an NFL roster is 53 players. You have expanded practice squads. It's 63 people before the coaching staff, before the camera crews. You're looking at 150 to 200 people in an enclosed space just to facilitate one NFL game.
Yeah.
And if their advice has, as a nation is, hey, let's stick to groups of less than 10 to make an exception for sports when it's, 20 times the volume, it just.
And think about all the people that come and go too, right? Like staff who work there, refs, like, do they have to get into the bubble too? Do they get to go home? It's just, there's so much to think about.
So let's talk about something. Maybe this isn't optimistic. I don't know. But the NFL top 100 came out. They dropped the first 30 yesterday. We know that 6 Packers have made the list at some point, and we definitely didn't have any in the 100 to 70 range. So who do you think the 6 are, and where do you think they fall? Do you think any of them will drop tonight when they do 69 to 40?
Yeah, I think some of them will drop tonight for sure. I mean, this is the players' vote for the players. So I think the chances of some of the guys that we think are snubbed, let's say, by the media, let's see what kind of like the respect is between inter-player respect, I guess. I think obviously you're going to have Aaron Rodgers and you're going to have Devontae Adams. I really hope people see that David Bakhtiari is one of the best tackles in the league. Obviously Za'Darius. You said there's 6.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. Personally, if I was voting, it would be Aaron Jones and then Jair. But
not Kenny Clark.
Oh, Kenny Clark too. Oh my God. Then who do you leave out?
I bet it's Jair.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Maybe. It's looking like 4 players will drop tonight.
Okay. So then that makes sense.
Who would be in your top 30, top 40? Who are the final 2 that you would have to put in that upper tier?
There's so many. Devontae, but I think he'll be tonight. I think Aaron will be in the top 30. I think it would be kind of wild if he wasn't. And then maybe Kenny.
Okay. Where do you think Aaron Jones is?
If he's on it?
I feel like, you can't lead the league in touchdowns and not have some respect put on your name, but
there's a lot of people out there who aren't, so I don't know. I'm just
Am I just projecting? Is that just,
I'm trying not to project. Like, I'm trying to be objective. Aaron will probably be in the 60s, I'd say. Jones. Okay. Yeah.
I feel like it's going to be Aaron Rodgers and Devontae in the top 30.
Yeah, probably. Even though Darius definitely deserves to be there, yeah, for sure.
But
leads the league in QB hits and pressures. It's fine.
And then you add Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and Kenny Clark and Everson Griffin. Maybe
Everson Griffin would be wild. My one okay, so obviously that would be a nasty front 7. He would fit schematically, I think, really well. But what does that mean for the cap? The Packers have 11.8 left this season. We should probably be using that money to extend Kenny, right? And now we're going to bring in another defensive end who needs to get paid. And albeit he's 32, so he's not going to garner the same contract he got last time, which was 4 years, $558 million, I think, or something like that with the Vikings. So it's not going to be anything like that. But can we afford him? That's my question. My practical question is yes, would I love him? Of course. He'd be disruptive. He'd be great. But are we going to shell out that money for him when someone like Snacks or Mike Daniels could be way less expensive?
Well, and I think that there's an interesting dynamic there too when we talk about the cap and ramifications for if a full season isn't played in the NFL, or if you get half your games played, all these players that have incentive-laden contracts for games started, number totals that milestones they're achieving. And if you sign a 1-year contract and you play 2 games, does that really count as your full season? What does that do to the cap? The accrued seasons for practice squad guys. So there's so many unknowns, and knowing that we have like a month now until the season kicks off, I guess closer to 6 weeks, just feels like there's a lot to try and figure out in not a lot of time.
Me so excited that that's the small timeline. Football. Yeah, like Big B said, Russ Ball might work his magic. I mean, we know that he's one of the best, right? So I don't know. Like you sent me that really interesting article today about Kevin King and like whether this season is going to make his price skyrocket or it's going to bring interesting questions, whether the Packers want to keep him or not, and some of his like inconsistency levels. And there's a lot of players to think about. I would love for them to just get like one done before the season starts, you know, like just have some level of like clarity on like,
Yep.
like there's so many unknowns, and it's like, I hope one of them gets done. It should be Kenny first. It really should be. But like maybe it'll be Bach. I know that David Bakhtiari, I think I listened to an interview with him where he said that he never really talks about that kind of stuff. Like if there's anything going on with his agent, that stays private. So that might be a surprise that's happening behind the scenes that nobody really talks about publicly. But again, I mean, what do you think? Like we typically don't give second contracts to our offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's, depending on how the season is shaking out, a lot of these deals, if the full season is played, you know, the Packers are notorious for doing their deals like December-ish, getting everybody ready for a playoff push, getting everybody signed and locked and loaded and all that good stuff. So I do agree with you that it'd be nice to have at least a couple of the pieces in place going into the full season, having nobody locked in and kind of wondering who's going to be retained. I mean, there are players like, I don't know if you would sign Kevin King right now. You know, you want to see what that next season looks like. Aaron Jones, I think, will get re-signed, but he could be the same way, where you're wondering what his numbers look like if he repeats or, you know, if he regresses even the slightest bit, which would still be phenomenal for him. But players like Corey Linsley, you're probably letting them test the market to some capacity and seeing kind of what that market is for interior offensive linemen. But
tough season to be on a contract year. Tough seasons to like, you want to go out there and prove it. You want to have the shot that you need. Like a guy like Kevin King, he had finally one full season healthy and feels like he's ascending. And then like what happens if this season gets cut short? You know, it's just tough for those guys. Tough.
Well, and I think about players too, like Drew Brees and guys that were like, I'm going to come back and play one more year. Mm-hmm. Like, is this
Tom Brady?
Yeah. Is this your 1 year? And then if this is it, do you walk? Do you call it a wash? Like, yes, you're aging another year now and you're, you know, but if you didn't take any of the hits or the physicality on your body for the year, then maybe you think that you're, you know, capable of playing an extra season. And then what does that do for the 2021 draft class? Whether or not this season is played, none of these teams are really getting a chance to evaluate their players to know where their roster holes are. Like, we have Christian Kirksey, and if the season isn't played, what happens at inside linebacker? You've never gotten the chance to evaluate any of those pieces. Everyone says Oren Burks needs to take a jump, and you have Ty Summers, and you drafted Kamal Martin, but there's just, we could talk about this for literal hours, I think,
know.
And we would never get anywhere.
Because I'm thinking about all the players too. Like, think about all the guys like, I don't know, like Phillip Rivers, and it's like he's on a 1 year deal. What happens to that 1 year deal? And like same thing with Rodgers, you know, like he's going to be 37 and yeah, he feels like he still has plenty left in the tank. But again, like I feel like there's a fine line between like not taking those hits, but also not getting the reps. Like, do you get out of practice and out of shape when you're not in that like game mode, when you're not in Lambeau practicing with your team? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's that balance of, yeah, you're not getting sacked every Sunday, but like, you're also not on the field playing. Like, does a guy lose? He doesn't lose it. You know, he doesn't forget how to play quarterback, but at the same time, like, you need the reps.
Well, and I think that we've seen a lot this offseason too, players having to get really creative because for the longest time, COVID had, you know, locked down gyms and things. So guys weren't able to just, you know, Aaron Jones talked about making a weight room in his garage that his dad helped him build. And we've seen clips of Jamal Williams running hills, and Aaron Rodgers and David Bakhtiari were running on the beach. And, if you've ever run in the sand, some of those, yeah, it does. I try not to run, but Same. When I do, yeah. So, just the different ways that the players have had to get creative to do these workouts, it is a good point. Like, we've heard from guys like Kingsley Kiki, who just had an interview with Pack-A-Day and with Game On, that players like Rashawn Gary, their body types are so different and still super muscular, but now it's more lean muscle, and kind of the different ways that players are shaping themselves this off season. They probably have more time than ever because they're not in person practicing.
Or really doing anything.
Well, yeah, they've got their tablets to study, but beyond that, I think they're getting really creative with some of these workouts.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some of the guys working out together, which I really love, because like, while you have this truncated or like basically non-existent off season together, but at least some of them are getting reps together. Some of them are getting that, one-on-one time, or that relationship on the field, relationship building time that they wouldn't have. I know that AJ Dillon and Jordan Love now are like buds and work out together. Like they're in that gym with the Aaron Rodgers decal, which I just love. Something about that I love. But I'm curious to see, I think LaFleur has talked a lot about what the offseason program has been and how he's really proud of and excited about the work that the guys have put in when it comes to studying the playbook and talking about the scheme. And I'm excited to see when they finally get in the building, which is soon, what all that studying and all that talking over Zoom, how that translates onto the field, and if it translates well, or if it's, we just lost the time together and we just are going to have to make up for it,
Yeah, and I think like hearing some of the players talk too, when Ty Summers came on Pack-A-Day a month or so ago, he was talking about how this gave him a really good opportunity to study what the Packers had at inside linebacker and what they were lacking, so that he could develop himself to kind of fill some of those holes. So depending on, the players themselves and the initiative they take, I think this is a really kind of good opportunity for them to look inward and figure out like the very specific pieces of their game that they want to improve on. But for the guys like Jordan Love, you would hope. But I mean, I can't imagine whether it's Jordan Love or like a Joe Burrow. Like we know Jordan Love isn't starting for a couple of years. He kind of lucked into the perfect situation. Or, even in Carolina, Teddy Bridgewater's a veteran at this point, but you have Matt Rule, you have a brand new head coach. So we've talked about this before, but the fact that the Packers coaching staff had a year together and Matt LaFleur wasn't coming in the middle of this, and we saw the cohesion and we saw how close-knit this group was, and that we can only expect them to build on that because they had those building blocks in place. Mm-hmm. To be going into that without any, a lot of these people haven't met in person yet. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that I think Jacob wrote an article about this for Game On too, how that continuity from last season to this season will be, I think, a benefit to teams like the Packers, where, like you said, there are some teams who have new head coaches, and those teams are supposed to have extra time too in the offseason together. They're allowed an extra week, I think it is, to get into the building together. Like, no one's getting that right now. And so another thing, like, I think Andy asked me this when I was on Pack-A-Day with him. It's like, do you thinking about Pettin, and like, imagine if we had brought in a new defensive coordinator this season, but instead we kept him. And I think that's going to help us a lot, besides the fact that I think he has a lot to offer to our defense. Like, the fact that these guys have been with him now, this is going on the third season, it's only going to help us and just make the transition to the season that much smoother.
Yeah. And I mean, nobody could have predicted this pandemic. And even in, the early in the 2020 year, when some reports were coming out, I don't think any of us expected the numbers to look like this and it to be as just ravaging as it has been. But when you think about like the continuity, like we were talking about, of NFL teams, I don't think that COVID contributed to the Packers signing certain free agents, but the core of the team really stayed the same. You swapped inside linebackers, probably a downgrade at right tackle. Brian Bulaga is one of the best in the game, but
Iowa.
But beyond that, I mean, adding Devin Funchess, there wasn't really no harm, no foul there. You didn't lose a wide receiver to make space for him. So the core pieces, you still have your left tackle, you still have your center, you still have your quarterback, your Hall of Fame quarterback, your running back, your wide receiver. You have
all your pass rushers, your top tandem cornerbacks, your top tandem safeties. Like, yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of the teams that had we joked about the Vikings having bare cupboards in the secondary, but those teams that now have to rely on a huge number of draft picks to kind of fill those holes that had big roster turnover, the Vikings defense specifically, and now if they lose Everson Griffin, there's just a lot that these teams have to consider. And if they're able to get up to speed, you'd have to think that gives teams like the Packers and the 49ers and the Saints a real advantage. Yeah, because they're retaining so many key pieces.
I think, too, it's already difficult enough to have your team success based off of how well your rookies integrate into the NFL. And then to add this to it, it's like, and again, like, yeah, we didn't predict this. I thought, oh, it'll be gone by September. We'll be fine by September. Obviously, that's not the case. We didn't do what we needed to do. That's not why we're here to talk about the failings of COVID in the United States. But at the same time, it's very much affected the season. And I don't know. I mean, okay, I have one last question. It's a little out there for the last 4 minutes. But like, let's say we have a full season and we somehow make it through. Maybe, yeah.
Wait, you froze for me. I'm sorry.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. But I heard you say, what if, and then everything.
Okay, maybe certain players, like maybe some players do have to go on and off the COVID, IR, as we're calling it. But like, is whoever wins the Super Bowl this year just going to be like a fake Super Bowl? Or are people really going to take this year seriously? Because every time I'm saying this because I watched the Mets lose 14-1 last night. And I was texting my friend and I was like, well, it's fine. It's a fake season. And I think for baseball it kind of is because it's like truncated. It's only 60 games. But like, I don't know. If let's say like the Packers win the Super Bowl this year, like, are people going to take that seriously?
I think that it'll be the running joke for a couple seasons because that's just the lifespan of the NFL and fans always need something to focus on. So whether it was Spygate, Deflategate, like there's always something that has to draw in a lot of the attention. But if we talk about Washington and the Super Bowl that they won during the lockout season, that sure there would be an asterisk there because they didn't play 16 games, but still won the Super Bowl, and however many years later, we don't talk about it. Yeah. Nobody really knows about it anymore. You don't really think about it unless it's a conversation like this where there might be a second asterisk season. And so, yeah, I mean, I think because everyone's facing the same challenges, and this virus does not discriminate, like, I think that says a lot. And I feel like since everyone's kind of working against the same odds, I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't give it an asterisk because we would be 14-time world champions and I'd be all about it. And I would run through the streets. So
I'd still probably bawl my eyes out and then take a bunch of shots. So
at the same time.
Yeah. We just won. Okay, last question because I really like it. I can't click on it for some reason, but Cody Roadcap said he received 2 invitations to meet and greet at the exact same time. You can only go to one. One is Jair and the second is MVS with his dog, which is honestly a tough choice because Ace is super cute. But I'm going with Jair. Sorry.
That's not surprising at all. Like,
I love dogs, but no dog will pull me away from a one-on-one situation with Jair Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would take Jair at this point too. Although I did watch Ace Boogie in some Good Morning Football interviews this morning, and he's just the best dog, the sweetest dog. Sits on his lap, like. Yeah, I wish my cat was that well behaved.
Mo, what's she doing? She's down there. She's
living her life.
If anyone hasn't met Mo yet, She's Maggie's 13-year-old cat.
15. She's old as shit.
15? Oh my God. She is a queen. She's got the best faces. She's got like resting bitch face on a cat. It's the best thing in the world. And she's always chilling with Maggie while we're recording and while Maggie's working. And once in a while she scurries across the screen. So maybe we'll get a cameo from Miranda.
When her arthritis isn't acting up and she can get up on the desk. All right, Perri, we're at the top of the hour. You have to finish cooking dinner for your dad's birthday. Make sure that you tell Mr. Goldstein happy birthday from all of us here at Game On and Happy Hour. If the people want to follow you on Twitter, how can they do that?
You can follow me at _Perri_Goldstein. Well, I can't speak. Wine's already getting to my head. And please also follow the podcast at PWSS Podcast. Maggie and I follow. Nice. You have this all ready to go. We podcast every week. You can find it on all the streaming services. Last week, we talked about quarterbacks. It was a great episode. Really, though, it was a great episode. Super in-depth. My girl knows what she's talking about. So, yeah. And then you can find us here every Monday. We'll be back to regularly scheduled programming at 6 p.m. Lambeau time next week.
I was going to say, girl, you're going to confuse everybody with your East Coast
I'm sorry.
time.
I'm Eastern time. Lambeau time, always 6 p.m.
All right. You can find my work. You can find my work 2 times a week with She Said TV. Perri and I both podcast with the Pack a Day podcast crew, even though Perri forgets to mention that every single time. And you can find me on Twitter Andy. At Maggie J. Loney. Yeah, Andy, if you're watching, Perri really is sorry.
I'm so sorry.
But thank you, everybody, for joining us. We super appreciate it. We hope that you had fun. We had fun, and we'll see you next week.